When the 20th century arrived, the Philippines had gone out of its way to becoming a nation of its own without the Spanish occupation. It was specifically on January 22, 1899, when what is known as the First Philippine Republic was established, and the first Philippine president, Emilio Aguinaldo, had become recognized around the world. This was the dawn of the new century for the archipelago nation. It was revolutionary, and numerous tales would go on throughout this short 100 years. From the beginning, the Philippines was renowned, not because it had successfully established the Malolos Republic, but because of the fact that during the year 1900, the archipelago nation had in fact had a nominal gross domestic product per capita of $1,033. Such a figure meant that the Philippines was in fact the second richest nation in the entire Asian continent on a per capita basis, just behind Japan. This feat was established because of the strong port destination that the Philippines, its people and the entire nation were successful in being agriculture-based exports, which during that time were scarce globally, as numerous wars and conflicts were happening, and the need for a proper supply of food was essential. The Philippines, which was known to have such a big economy during those years, were also, in a matter of fact, at an ongoing war with the United States of America. 1899 to 1902 was what is known as the Philippine-American War, one that saw numerous infrastructures, lives, and farms to be destroyed. But this also established a newfound connection, as the Philippines quickly hopped out of Spanish rule and into the American hands. Would it have been better had the Spanish stayed, or rather the archipelago nation would never have been conquered, is an entirely speculative story that could interestingly unfold but had not. The United States occupation, however, did still do a lot of miraculous work in the Philippines. The economy of the Philippines during these nearly 40 years of colonization had seen high growth. From 1900 to 1913, the Philippines saw one of its biggest growth decades. Their role was to directly develop infrastructure and quickly further its investments in agriculture. During these years, they were regarded as a nation that outpaces its neighbors. By 1913, it had a GDP per capita of over $1,418, which was a figure above Japan, which only had $1,334 that year. Its population numbered around 10 million Filipinos, meaning that it had a GDP of around $14 billion. It had also benefited from the integration of the U.S. economy. The 1909 Payne-Aldrich Tariff Act helped pave the way for a free trade agreement, which helped push the Philippines' exports to the U.S., meaning a lot of its agriculture and manufactured products were going into the economy of the North American giant. It was in fact valued at over 601 million pesos by 1920, which was 66% going into the U.S. alone. By the 1930s, however, export prosperity would slow down. Its economy, which in 1929 had a per capita of $1,564, surpassed by Japan's 1949, would soon falter due to the emergence of war, and also newly enacted laws in the United States, which capped exports from the Philippines. In 1935, the Philippines held out and planned for a peaceful transition to its full independence. The Commonwealth of the Philippines, as they called it, stood with the then President Manuel Quezon. What was supposed to be the independence of the Philippines, however, had to be postponed due to the coming of the Japanese. The attack on Pearl Harbor also meant that the Philippines was next. This was one of the most tragic events ever in the history of the Philippines. Its economy went from agriculture export-driven. It had strong ties around the world, along with the U.S., as its major ally to whom it had strong exports. The U.S. ties with the Philippines had even paved the way for the first creative waves of immigration from the Philippines to the U.S., which would in the modern day help create the remittance economy of the Philippines, as overseas Filipino embarked on a long and rich journey abroad. That, however, had all been reduced. The Philippines experienced negative growth rates in its economy all the way from 1929 to the end of 1950. Long years experiencing no growth at all. Numerous bombings and the reduction of productivity were around the Philippines. But as soon as the war had ended in 1946, the Philippines was ready and back on track to construct its damaged economy. The next 2 decades, from 1950 to 1970, saw the annual growth rate of GDP per capita finally see a positive number. Although small at an average of 2.4%, it still was viable as the Philippines incurred numerous challenges during these 2 decades, as they were left with damaged cities, food, and financial crisis. This was also the time that they reigned with the Third Philippine Republic. The significant economic activity during these 20 years was that they had finally established the Central Bank of the Philippines, which helped the entire financial system of the nation. 1953 was also when the Korean War had begun, which also saw over 7,450 Filipino soldiers helping South Korea, one that helped pose a strong strategic relationship between the two nations. Throughout the tenure of then-President Ramon Magsaysay, the growth rate of the Philippines grew tremendously. From the specific years he became president, he sat on 1954 to 1956, the Philippines' economy experienced 7.2% of growth. The Philippines and the U.S. exchange rate was noted as 2 pesos to $1. Its population has also doubled since 1913, from 10 million to 21 million. The next 2 presidents, Carlos P. Garcia and Diosdado Macapagal, along with Magsaysay, created numerous domestic and foreign policies to help enhance the entire economy of the Philippines. It was directed from the agriculture economy to the Filipino First policy, which saw favored business activities locally rather than foreign, to land reform laws and much more. This tenure had quickly ended, and by 1965 the Philippines would see a new president, the name of Ferdinand Marcos. His tenure in the government saw him become the president from 1965 all the way to 1986. During his first term in 1967, the Philippines had amassed 33 million people and had a GDP of 285 billion pesos, or $7.7 billion. Its per capita stood at about 8,932 pesos, or $235, and its currency contrast to the dollar was 6 pesos to $1. The Marcos administration was ambitious. It wanted to change a lot in the country. Hence, it constructed numerous mega projects around the nation, some of which, however, were too overly ambitious and had experienced overpricing and corruption. But some of them had still paved the way for a stronger economy. By 1985, the Philippines' economy grew to about a GDP of 571 billion pesos, or $35 billion. Its per capita had risen to 10,000 pesos, or $644, and its population at 54 million. During these times, however, while its GDP grew, it had numerous troubles plaguing the economy. Its external debt rose 70-fold as overly ambitious projects were financed, from $2.3 billion in 1970 to over $26.2 billion in 1985. This was in fact external debt, a notorious loan program that endangers an economy. It was also during these times that the 2 oil crises occurred, one in 1973 and the other in 1979. This had hit the economy hard, especially the second one. At the same time, the US had raised interest rates, to which the Philippines was a major borrower. Had then experienced its external debt further be a huge burden, and the Philippines' economy had been struck. Soon after the Marcos presidency, the Philippines from 1986 to 1998 experienced strong growth. Numerous foreign and domestic policies have emerged, some of the most notable ones being the Foreign Investment Act, the Build, Operate, Transfer Law, and the famous Philippines 2000 Plan, which saw numerous ambitious schemes to help alleviate the external debt the Philippines had and increase its entire economy. In 1986, it had a GDP of $33 billion, but by 1996, it had grown to over $94 billion, close to threefold in less than 2 decades. Although unlike the entire century, the Philippines' economy had faltered compared to its neighbors. Nevertheless, its boom had somehow started, and promising moves were expected by the coming 21st century. Fidel Ramos, then president from 1992 to 1998, was a time when it experienced strong growth. It saw the gross national income and GDP growth, helped lower the inflation rate, and numerous industries were privatized or deregulated. It had also seen its taxation system reformed, and external debt to manageable levels. Its growth trajectory was finally catching up to its neighbors, but disaster struck as the Asian financial crisis hit in 1997. This saw a huge economic crisis globally, and so much for the Philippines, which saw the GDP fall to $74 billion by 1998. Its promise of a booming economy had been reduced. The turn of the 21st century, on the other hand, will see a change of hands between the government and its economy. But that part will move on to the next video, as this series is a 3-part video and this was the second one. Anyway, what do you think?